They marched across continents for it. They slaughtered cities for it. They said it could bring victory or eternal damnation. It was not a sword, not a king, not even a holy book. It was a fragment of wood, a sliver, but they believed it was part of the true cross, the very cross upon which Jesus Christ was crucified. And for a time, it held more power than all the armies of Europe combined. But what if I told you, this sacred relic, the very symbol of the Crusades, almost destroyed them? This is not just the story of blind faith. This is the story of how a single piece of wood shattered empires, exposed the fragility of religious power, and nearly brought the Crusades to an end. Our story begins in the 12th century, during the height of Crusader rule in the Holy Land. After the bloody conquest of Jerusalem in 1099, the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was established. A fragile, bloody state carved out in a land surrounded by enemies. Its survival depended on divine favor, or so the rulers claimed. And at the center of their claim stood a relic, the true cross. No other object symbolized the Crusader cause more deeply. It was believed to be the actual wooden cross discovered by Saint Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, in the 4th century, unearthed in Jerusalem and kept under the guardianship of the Church. But by the 1100s, it was more than just an object of veneration. It was a weapon of war. Before every major battle, the cross was carried at the head of the Crusader armies. Clerics would raise it high. Soldiers would kneel before it, weep before it, draw courage from it. It was a divine banner, a portable contract with God. And yet, this faith was blinding. In 1187, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was facing an existential threat. Saladin, the brilliant and unrelenting Muslim general, was uniting the fractured Muslim world. His victories in Egypt, Syria, and Palestine had placed the Crusader states in checkmate. But the Crusaders had a secret weapon. They believed that as long as the true cross was present on the battlefield, they could not lose. That belief would soon lead them to catastrophe. The warning signs came long before the battle. Saladin's forces were growing in number and confidence. The Crusaders, meanwhile, were divided, arrogant, and desperate. King Guy of Lusignan, the newly crowned ruler of Jerusalem, was warned not to march his army into the open heat of the desert to meet Saladin near the horns of Hattin. But he did, because the cross was with them. On July 4th, 1187, the Crusader army, dehydrated, disoriented, and surrounded, was annihilated by Saladin's forces at the Battle of Hattin. Tens of thousands of Christian soldiers were killed or captured. But the greatest loss wasn't human. It was spiritual. The true cross was taken. Saladin's men captured it from the battlefield and paraded it through the Muslim world. Some sources say he sent it to Damascus. Others believe it was burned, broken, or hidden. But one thing was clear. The symbol that had guided Crusaders for nearly a century, the relic that was supposed to guarantee divine victory, was gone. And the psychological impact was devastating. In Europe, the news of the loss spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a military defeat. It was a cosmic one. How could God allow his cross to fall into Muslim hands? Had the Crusaders failed in their piety? Or worse, had God abandoned them? The Vatican was thrown into a crisis. Preachers who once spoke of God's favor now wept in the pulpits. Monasteries went silent. Kings who had once promised support hesitated. Even the common people, who had sacrificed sons and fortunes to the crusading cause, began to question. This single moment, the loss of a relic, shattered the illusion of divine protection. And for a time, the crusading movement teetered. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because instead of facing the truth, that the Crusaders had grown corrupt, divided, and arrogant, the Church doubled down. They reframed the loss of the true cross not as judgment, but as a test, a divine trial, and they needed more blood to answer it. Thus began the Third Crusade, a campaign led by the mightiest kings of Europe, Richard the Lionheart, Philip Augustus of France, and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, all to retrieve the Holy Land, and, unofficially, to retrieve the cross. But here's the twist. Despite their military campaigns, despite their victories, despite rivers of blood spilled across Palestine, The cross was never found. Its fate remains a mystery to this day. Some believe Saladin kept it and used it as leverage in negotiations, though he never mentioned it in surviving letters. Others believe it was hidden by Muslim scholars, its pieces distributed among distant cities to keep it from ever being used as a rallying symbol again. And some believe it was destroyed, erased, because to Saladin it was not a holy object. It was propaganda, and by destroying it, he destroyed the Crusaders' greatest illusion, that they alone held God's favor. But whether it still exists or not, the relic's power was already broken. The myth had shattered. After Hattin, Crusader armies could no longer rely on spiritual invincibility. They had to confront their own failures in leadership, in unity, in morality. And though the Crusades would continue for another century, the dream of a divinely guided conquest had died. Not with a sword, but with a splinter of wood lost to time. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of all. When men place faith in objects more than in humanity, when war is justified by sacred symbols rather than sacred lives, it only takes one relic, lost, stolen, or destroyed, to bring it all crashing down. The true cross was never recovered, but the echo of its loss still haunts history, not because it vanished, but because of what it revealed, that even the most powerful faith can be undone by the very thing it worships.